Hi, Lana. How are you? You'll see me in a second. Hope you can hear me. Can you hear me okay? Hi, Nancy. How are you? Nice to see you too. Oh, great. Oh, thanks. Okay, so I'm going to start off. Uh, okay, the title of this stream is "We Have to Stop the Rigging or We're Done." The Amazon burning shows how critical our current situation is. We are going to have threats of international scale that are going to arise from our situation with respect to climate change. And we're going to have to cope with crises like the Amazon crises right now by taking a collective security approach. I think that means that the great powers, or the larger powers in the world anyway, are going to have to put aside their differences. And of course, for them to put aside their differences, they have to be actually become agreed on certain basics, simply because they're going to have to collaborate in order to defend us all against the climate change. The Amazon crisis is only one of many that we're going to have to face in the coming years. Now, to operate on an international basis without having a world government, which clearly is very, very far away for us now, we have to have a consensus among the great powers that we'll all do everything we can to end the climate emergency threat, including threats posed by rogue nations that insist on destroying their own environments in such a way as to damage a lot of other nations as well as themselves. There may be certain environmental changes that can more or less be constrained to a small nation, but something like having having a regime of the significance and power which the Bolsonaro regime has in Brazil, having a regime like that controlling a country like that, we simply cannot have it. Um, the nations of the world have to come together to stop an individual nation from so ruining the environment inside of that nation that it provides us with problems that are worldwide, that have a significant impact on the whole world. Now, clearly, in order for the United States to be free to join such actions, to be part of such a collective security system, it will be necessary for the United States government to be functional once again. That means, at a minimum, that we have people running the government who recognize the urgency of the climate emergency and who do not engage in bullshit about that. We cannot tolerate lies and dissembling and fantasy and false problems in this particular area. I don't think there are too many areas in which we can actually tolerate that, but certainly not in this area any longer. We must have truth. We must have a government that respects truth. We must have a party system that respects truth. We must have parties that respect truth. And we must have a party system that works if we're going to have a government that works. Now, people often talk about the Democratic Party and the changes which the Democratic Party is beginning to experience, and which the establishment in the Democratic Party and the establishment in the media and the establishment in a variety of industries are coming together to resist. We cannot allow this. We're in no position to tolerate it. We have to have people who recognize the climate emergency and the dire straits that we are in, and who put the public purpose before their own narrow interests, in control of the party again, the Democratic Party again, the Republican Party too, for that matter. But the first of the parties that has the capacity to change, and where change has already started, we have to weigh in with the first of these parties and say, we will break you if you do not allow changes to occur through fair procedures in your party. And we have to say to the media too, first we have to say to the party, we have to say to the party, look, you say you're choosing the nominees for office based on the primary system. That means that you must be neutral with respect to candidates who qualify for primaries. You can't be putting your thumb on the scale anymore. I mean, the Democratic Party is scandalous right now. There was no reason, no political reason, no public purpose reason for cutting the field down to 10 people right now. Why did they cut it down to 10 people? Because they wanted everyone on the same stage to create an extravaganza and to take up only one night of their precious TV time. Well, let's remember this. It's our TV time. They have licenses. It's the public airways. This calls out for a situation where 2, 3, maybe 4 people were close enough to the cutoff point to continue to be in the debates. Tom Steyer, for example. I don't hold a brief for Tom Steyer. I don't particularly care for his platform. Of course, I agree with those people who say he bought his way in. He bought his way in. But I say to those people, look, Steyer bought his way in with his own money. Harris and Buttigieg and Cory Booker have bought their way into the debates. Not because they were so popular, but because they've been representing the interest of the donors from the start. So they bought their way in by selling out. Steyer bought his way in through using his own money. I'm afraid I don't see the ethical difference there. If the people who accepted the donor money in the primaries are considered to have qualified because they got the required number of donations, then I don't see any ethical reason to exclude Tom Steyer because he used his own money to buy his way in, okay, in a short time. He narrowly missed getting into the debates. I don't know if he has anything interesting to offer. It doesn't look like he does from his website, okay, from what I see on the website. I don't see anything that's unusual. But he's got more than 130,000 donations, indicating a wide enough level of support that it seems to me he ought to be in one of the debates at least. But Tulsi Gabbard, of course, she was in so many polls. She met their 2% criterion in something like 24 polls. She just did not get there in 4 of the polls that they designated as acceptable polls. So what? She had nearly 170,000 donations. And there were altogether 24 polls in which she exceeded the 2%. In some, she got to 3%. Obviously, she's interesting enough to have included her in this. And maybe there are one or two more who deserve to be heard from further as well. I personally think, okay, that Gillibrand did. I don't know how much difference there is between Gillibrand and Harris. But I don't see what harm would have been done to have allowed 14 people to remain in the debate, if there are 14 people who were that close, and to have had two debates of 7 people each. I don't think that would have been an unreasonable situation. I think the DNC should have gone out of their way to be fair, and fair in this case, I think, has to be evaluated in terms of actually providing candidates with a fair chance to be heard. The rigid criteria used by the DNC may have seemed to be superficially fair, but as many people have already remarked, we don't know what the DNC criteria was for choosing the polls that they selected as the favored polls that candidates had to qualify in. There's much evidence that there were many polls that were not actually selected by them as qualifying polls that were better than some of the polls that they did select as qualifying polls. They weren't transparent about what their criteria were. This was not openly discussed. There wasn't an opportunity to object to the selection criteria of the polls. The polls themselves have not been very transparent in terms of the methodologies they used. It appears the polls that were selected by the DNC were nearly uniformly biased towards polling people who were 49 and over. And we know that polls like that disadvantaged certain of the candidates and were not fair polls because their methodologies were flawed, actually, to begin with. We know the DNC was putting its thumb on the scale by selecting those polls. We knew from the beginning who those polls were likely to advantage. We also know that no harm is done by allowing candidates to set up their own debates. If the DNC doesn't want to have a debate on a particular topic, there's no reason why the candidates should not be free to arrange such a debate. Of course, they are free to arrange for such a debate. They've got free speech. They can all arrange, for such a debate. But of course, those who do will be sanctioned by the DNC. They have a choice between having one of these outside debates or unifying together to break the party. This is a bad choice for the party to give to candidates, because there will come a time when if all the candidates devoutly wish to debate the climate emergency, they will say to the DNC, to hell with you. To hell with you. This issue is more important, okay, to debate than you are. You can't throw us all out. And besides, we're on the primary ballots anyway. We can run our campaigns outside of the party. There'll come a time when leading candidates will say this to the party. Anyway, we the people have to make it clear that we're not going to tolerate any more rigging by the media and by the party brass and by the donors to put their thumbs on the scale of the primaries. And the way we make it clear is through boycotts. Don't follow the mainstream news channels. Strike against them. Create a situation where their views fall, where they get hurt with their advertisers. Retaliate against them for putting their thumbs on the scale. They're supposed to be neutral. For God's sake, make them neutral. Make them neutral. And the same goes for the party brass. Hell, the Republican Party brass in the 2016 election were more neutral. They were more neutral among all their candidates than the Democratic Party officials were when they rigged that primary for Hillary Clinton. We know they rigged it. Everybody knows they rigged it. And now they're trying to rig it again in 2019. They're doing everything they can to rig it. Okay. The leadership of the Democratic Party in the Senate and the House is also doing everything it can to put its thumbs on the scale, to rig it for the centrist candidates who are running in the primaries. We've got to do what we can to stop that too. But with respect to the party, we've got to go into the streets about this. We have to protest in large, large numbers against this party that thinks they have the right to undermine small d democracy primaries, that they have the right to claim to people that these primaries are fair, while they're constantly putting their thumbs on the scale. We cannot allow them to do this any longer. We have to use any means at our disposal to break these people who are running the Democratic Party. What does that mean? It means paying attention to the people who are rigging it in the party, and seeing to it that whether or not they succeed at rigging it, that their careers are at an end. That since they rigged it, They're no longer welcome in American politics. Why not? Because they're undermining democracy. We have to make sure that we do this, especially in the Democratic Party. Because if we get the Democratic Party clean again, so it's no longer rigging, so that it is neutral among the candidates, that will pressure the Republican Party into doing the same thing. And if the Democratic Party doesn't do this, we have to have the guts, and we have to have the guts in the short run, to go to a party that will run primaries that are democratic. I mean, we should have done this already. We should have done this immediately after the 2016 elections. We should have done it immediately. Okay, so we need to have our democracy back. So we need to get candidates into office who will do what is necessary to combat the existential threat of the climate emergency. Dale points out correctly that they made it perfectly clear and blatant during the DNC lawsuit with the Becks that they're free to go into their traditional smoke-filled rooms and do as they please. They're going to do it again. Okay, they did make it clear, and they did win the earlier case, but that lawsuit is still on appeal. And it hasn't been settled. It hasn't been actually denied at the level of the higher courts yet. There's still a chance, however small, that it will get to the Supreme Court, and that the Supreme Court will recognize that what went on in 2016 during the DNC primary was a simple fraud. The DNC was claiming to the primary voters that the primaries were fair and that the voters were selecting the nominee and that the DNC was neutral. I don't know how many times they claimed that. They held that out to the voters, to the members of the Democratic Party continuously. That cannot be legal. I mean, that's equivalent to a private company making fraudulent claims as it sells its products to consumers. It's just like that. I know they have the rights of private companies. But when you get right down to it, Private companies don't have the right to commit a naked fraud. They don't have that right, okay, to commit a naked fraud. But apart from the fact of whether the courts will say they have that right or not, we have the right to deny our support for that party and to break that party. And we have to act as a collective to do it. Just as the nations have to act for collective security, to do everything they can to cope with the climate emergency, we have to act for collective security in the internal political system by undermining the parties that will not accept in their primary the will of the people. That's necessary for our collective security. And the only way we can make that happen is by acting collectively. I think, given the kind of rigging we've been seeing, it's long past time that we started thinking about the movement for a People's Party as a serious alternative, and maybe take the Green Party a lot more seriously than we have as well. We have to look to our alternatives, because I tell you now, if the Democratic Party rigs this primary, if they put their thumb on the scale, and the resulting choice is one of these centrist Democrats who exhibit no will at all to handle the climate crisis, then we have to go elsewhere for the 2020 election. And we can't let fear of Trump stop us from going elsewhere. We can't let that fear stop us. Again. If we do it again, if we do let that fear stop us, then we're done. I mean, we're just done. We have faced this choice in 2016. And we sat still for the nomination of somebody we thought was terrible out of fear of Trump. And we allowed that to happen. If we do the same thing again, then what's that going to mean for 2022 and for 2024? If we can't make it happen for us in 2020, the chance to contain the climate emergency will likely be gone. And even before 2020, we need to take whatever action is open to us to pressure Trump and this Republican government to do what has to be done to bring the Amazon and other climate crises that emerge under control. We cannot stop with this. We have to make the movement explode now. Dale Weaver says, I seriously doubt Sanders would go third party. Well, I have my doubts about whether he would go third party too. He gave his word that he would not go third party. But his word was certainly predicated on the assumption that the Democratic Party would not be putting its thumbs on the scale again. And literally, the fate of our world depends upon depends upon his going third party in 2020 if the Democratic Party has put their thumb on the scale once again for a centrist or someone who we know has sold out to the donors. I guess my mic was getting too loud because Randy tells me I need to put a sock on my mic to stop the transient overload. Sorry, Randy. Okay, any other comments or questions? Okay, let's see if I have any more comments. Nope, the last comment was to put a sock on my mic. I'm not sure I want to end on that particular note. So please share, like, and subscribe. And please become a patron at www.patreon.com/Joe_Firestone, all in lowercase. All contributions will be gratefully accepted. Even contributions of $1 a month help. I'll check again to see if you have any further comments. If not, I am going to say goodnight and thank you for coming. I will next be on a Tuesday night because Monty and I are going out for our anniversary dinner on Monday night. It's not quite our anniversary, but it's the time when we could get our two kids together with us. So we're doing it on Monday night. Lana wants to know: has any election been fair as we would like it? I have a book that I am still reading called Deliver the Vote. It goes back before the revolution with local elections. They were always but shenanigans. It was very depressing. Okay, my answer to that question is no. They were never have never been as fair as we would like it. But I think that during the 1970s, okay, and immediately after the reforms that came out of the McGovern convention, that the primary elections were fair in the Democratic Party for a while. Okay, for a while, I think that they were fair. Thank you, Lana. It's our 53rd anniversary. Was every local election fair? Oh, that's my daughter. She's here for the week. She's running around in back of me to pick up a computer. Her computer was on the floor there. So, they really stabbed us in the back with the rigged voting machines. Yes, they did. They stabbed us in the back with those machines. We've known it for a long time. Okay, but again, we knew since the early 2000s at least that there was something wrong with the machines, and they were hackable, but people weren't watching. They were not watching. We were not alert. We've allowed our democracy to be taken from us. One of the most vital things in our democracy is voting. How is it that when we immediately learned about the machines that could be rigged, that we did not insist then and there that everybody had to go back to paper ballots? If we had pushed for that strongly in like 2002, we might well have gotten it. We might well have gotten it. I mean, I tell you, we've let it happen. We haven't been watching. We made the assumption our system was basically fair for a long time and didn't begin to realize that it was unfair until perhaps the Obama period. And we've done very little for the 10 years after that. We need structural reform, okay, of our system. We need structural reform. So, I'm going to say goodnight now, and thank you again for coming, and I'm going to end the stream.